I'm not sure what the trick is, so I'm gonna let them figure it out. Sorry.
Oh, you want me to bring it up?
No, I know how to bring it up. It's not
It's not staying.
it's not staying.
Oh.
Sorry.
We need to make
Oh, tighten that middle.
Part of the middle there, yeah.
Oh,
I was doing the wrong side. I got it. I'm sorry.
thank you. See, the woman behind the woman that Okay. No, that's okay. All right, good evening, everyone.
Hi, good evening. How's everyone? Thanks for coming out. I'm Kiana Faircloth, host of Artemisy Podcast. I'm here to introduce the panel here and welcome you on behalf of the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. This is a partnership with Winter Jazz Festival, and we're so excited to host this panel of amazing women here tonight. We want to thank Jazz at Lincoln Center for partnering with us on this as well. And this is a movement, the current status of gender equity in jazz is a panel that will be moderated by Niama Safia Sandy. And I'm going to pass it on first to Ms. Gina Izo, who's on the steering committee for This Is a Movement. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Kiana. We are really excited to be here with you tonight, and thank you, everyone. Welcome. Before we introduce this incredible lineup that we have, I just want to say a few words about This Is a Movement. I am a part of the steering committee, and this initiative is seeking to create a more equitable music industry, specifically focusing on gender justice in the areas of jazz and Black American music. The Me Too movement activated a number of conversations around gender justice, and many of those efforts in the music industry were disparate. This Is a Movement was launched in 2021 with the hope that we could bring together a space to build a community, to focus on these efforts, to bring in new perspectives, and to share resources, and to advance these conversations around equity in this area. So with that being said, This Is a Movement, the name itself was chosen to acknowledge that there is larger work being done in this realm, but to really focus on the long-term commitment that we all share in this work. So I want to acknowledge my other colleagues on the steering committee. We have Sarah Elizabeth Charles, Caroline Davis, Niama Safia Sandy, Bryce Rosenblum, Amanda Eckery, Asia Burrell-Wood, our former steering committee members Sada Serpa, Jen Shu, our producers Frida Knowles and Hannah Beaumont-Poole, and our research team, Dr. Mahogany Bonds and Dr. Autumn T. Harrell. So I'm going to turn this over as we welcome all of the guests we have here tonight and incredible speakers to share all of their insight. And I'm going to turn this now over to Niama.
Thank you so much, Gina. Good evening, everyone. Oh, no. Let's try that again. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here this evening with these wonderful, luminary, brilliant women. Unfortunately, I am having some Wi-Fi problems, so I might need some help reading their bios. If you would maybe quickly, please. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Yes, so we have a short video that we will share with you, just a sort of overview of This Is a Movement quite short. Well, maybe not that short, but it'll be great.
My name is Sarah Elizabeth Charles.
My name is Sada Serpa.
My name is Jen Shu.
Bryce Rosenblum.
And this is a movement.
What is it like to be a woman in jazz?
This age-old question is often asked of musicians who have
I'm sorry. Let's try that again.
happened.
My name is Sarah Elizabeth Charles.
My name is Sada Serpa.
My name is Jen Shu.
Bryce Rosenblum.
And this is a movement.
What is it like to be a woman in jazz?
This age-old question is often asked of musicians who happen to be female. But is it the right question?
What about other questions that point to non-dominant groups of musicians experiencing unequal representation and opportunity in this industry?
What about others who are marginalized as a result of race, class, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, and/or age?
The inequities that exist in this music are broad-ranging, and we believe can be remedied by zooming out and considering the culture of the music as a whole.
More helpful questions, therefore, might be: who has been left out or behind in the dominant narrative of this music, and why?
What does a transformation of culture that includes everyone, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, class, race, etc., look like?
Melba Liston once said in an interview, "First you are a jazz musician, then you are black, then you are a female."
I mean, it goes down the line like that.
We're like the bottom of the heap.
Melba's words represent the common sentiments of many women in her generation and still ring true today.
From sexism on the bandstand to being shuffled to the side of bookings and networking opportunities, women, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and other marginalized musicians in this industry face similar mistreatments, placing them also at the bottom of the heap.
To confront this reality, we have come
together
to present this
is a
movement
towards liberation,
a jazz and gender convening. Originally scheduled to take place in person during Winter Jazzfest, the convening will now be held online under the auspices of Winter Jazzfest.
This is a movement did not appear out of thin air. It rose from a feeling of necessity to offer space for listening, learning, and exploration via panel discussions, questions, research presentations, and smaller group exchanges and deep dives.
Those of us responsible for initiating this gathering do not claim to own any initiatives or ideas, nor do we mean for it to be hierarchical in nature.
Rather, this initiative has grown out of the work of numerous individuals, ideas, and labor, intellectual and otherwise.
We believe it is important to recognize that this is just as much about acknowledging the tireless work that has been done
as it is about continuing to challenge ourselves to live up to the legacy and labor of those who came before us.
We're standing on the shoulders of Black feminist thought leaders such as Audre Lorde, Barbara Smith, and Bell Hooks.
Intersectional scholars such as Anna Julia Cooper and Kimberly Crenshaw.
Activists and community organizers such as Sojourner Truth, Ella Baker, and Fannie Lou Hammer.
And a great many under-celebrated and underrepresented musicians.
Our initiative aims to create a space in which individuals, institutions, and organizations interested in doing equity work can come together
and start to build a more effective model for what this industry could be.
Within our ever-expanding network, the goal is to come together to exchange, imagine, and create.
Conversation and dialogue are both essential to making this as a movement long-lasting and impactful.
However, musicians cannot be solely responsible for this effort. The industry and current power structures include many more than the musicians. Curators, writers, editors, educational institutions, venues, festivals, and others desiring equity have a stake in this endeavor as well.
Our This is a Movement gathering will therefore include and invite all of these individuals into one conversation space in an effort to level the playing field and have meaningful discussion.
We encourage our collective community to join us in co-creating what has the potential to be a fully realized, equitable present and future in service of this rich art form.
A future in which the music can thrive and progress more than we ever thought was possible
for generations to come.
Thank you so much. So I am thrilled to introduce our first panelist, Roxy Coss. Musician, composer, bandleader, educator, and activist Roxy Coss has become one of the most unique and innovative saxophonists on the scene. Winner of the 2022 Downbeat Critics Poll Rising Star category in soprano saxophone, an ASCAP Young Jazz Composer Award recipient, Jazz's Magazine Artist to Watch, and a winner of a Hot House Magazine and Jazz Mobile Tenor Saxophone Award. Roxy has been a New York City fixture for over a dozen years, touring and performing around the world. Her sixth album as a bandleader, entitled Disparate Parts, was released on March 25th on Outside in Music. Coss has performed as a side musician with jazz luminaries including Clark Terry, Louis Hayes, Rufus Reid, Maurice Hines, Billy Kay, Houston Person, Gene Perla, Bill Charlap, Claudio Roditi, Jeremy Pelt, Willie Jones III, Jeffrey Keyser, Ken Peplakowski, Darcy James Argue, and the Diva Jazz Orchestra. She is the founder and president of Women in Jazz Organization, or WEJO, serves on the board of directors for the Jazz Education Network, and is currently a jazz faculty member at the Juilliard School. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Come on, you guys.
Thank you.
Hold on. Let's do that again. Let us welcome Roxy warmly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here, and it's a pleasure, and thank you all for attending. I'm excited to be part of this important conversation and hear from everybody. Of course, being first, we'll see how it goes, but we have been asked to present on the work we are doing and one project over the past year in regards to the topic of tonight's panel discussion, which is the current status of gender equity in jazz, Black American music, and creative music spaces. Okay, great. I'm going to talk about something specific to Women in Jazz Organization, WEJO. And first, I just want to tell you what WEJO is. We are a collective of over 500 professional jazz musicians and composers who identify as women and non-binary. I am the president. Tahira Clayton is the vice president and also director of the WEJO Mentors Program. Allegra Levy is our secretary, and the organization is basically run by the three of us. Our mission statement, of course, was up there, but really what we are trying to do is create a level playing field in jazz so that women and non-binary people can contribute and participate in the art form, and hopefully the goal being that the art form and the community and the industry are a better place for it, and everybody benefits from that, including audience members and everybody in between. So I'm not sure what's happening, but WEJO as an organization, I'll use my notes instead. WEJO's doing a ton of stuff, and we work with initiatives in community engagement, education, concerts, jam sessions, institutional consultations, and broad activism, individual promotion, career enhancement development, resources including educational resource components and support, community events, community building, conference presences in the various parts of what jazz means, as well as other services for our members like therapy, mindfulness workshops, yoga, etc. So that was, Okay, we're having a hard time. Just ignore that and focus on me. And within each of those categories, we are doing a ton of initiatives. So I wanted to focus on one today in this prompt that I was given to kind of showcase what work WeJo is doing in this space and how we feel that work in terms of building equity shows up in an individual project, but how that also represents the work that we're doing in the overall organization, and hopefully is something that is easily modeled for the community at large. WeJo Mentors, what is this? It's a program designed to connect and enrich the community of women and non-binary people in jazz, providing strong role models to young, up-and-coming musicians. So we're pairing professionals with up-and-coming women and non-binary musicians on the scene, 18 to 24 years old. The program is 2 private lessons, 4 hang sessions, and a bunch of events that we require them to attend at least 2 events throughout the season. It's really also been like a community building thing for the mentees. They've really connected through these events. And you can see the events on the right of what we're offering these mentees, aside from the mentorship connection itself with this professional musician. The mentorship program started, we're in our 6th season, and WeJo was founded July 2017, right before Me Too, right before We Have Voice, kind of in that time that I think, as the video was saying, we all sort of felt this collective need for something to happen. And WeJo Mentors followed shortly after. I think it's been an integral part of what WeJo is, and how can we leave a better space for these new people coming into the community. Emily Pecoraro came to me and she said, what if we have like an ambassadorship program? Because I know membership is limited to professionals. What about the next generation? How can we, start to bridge the gap here? Emily ran the program for a few years, and in 2020, Tahira Clayton took over. I think that this is something that I want to highlight because in WeJo, we have been dealing with institutionally. I started this organization as a white woman. So what we found is other membership looks like me. We have now a membership of white women, generally speaking, my age and older, not too old, right? So people want to see themselves in you, which is the whole idea of mentorship program in the first place. People need to see themselves in the thing, otherwise they can't see themselves doing it. So we work very actively in WeJo, and we have been working to say, how can we become more diverse, more inclusive, more accessible? So I wanted to highlight some of the specific things we've done within the WeJo Mentors program this year specifically, to try to attack those initiatives and those goals. I'm good, thank you. As long as I can find my slide. Okay. So one thing that we've been working on in WeJo Mentors is increasing accessibility. So we've created scholarships for the application fees, where just by asking, we'll cover the cost of their application fee. It can be based on need or just a feeling of need, as long as they express that. Another thing we've done is change the program requirements. Initially, it was strictly a collegiate program, but we felt that was very limiting to a traditional jazz educational academia route. So we've now just focused on an age group of a stage in which we feel is very in need of that specific type of mentorship. Of course, we can all benefit from mentors, and I get adults saying, can I have a mentor? And I'm like, yeah, me too. But sort of, in college to out of college age range, where you're starting to develop your own voice, you really need guidance. You really want to be connected to a professional network and gigs and work and, how am I going to make a living? We also have limited the program participant number. At first, we took everybody. We wanted to be as inclusive as possible, so we took all the applicants, and we got at one point, we got up to over 35 people in the program. It was too much. We couldn't, the resources. So we limited it to deliver a better focus pointed experience for the applicants who we selected. This has actually been really great because we're able to offer them more. All of these events and workshops, now we have resources to go find more women in the community, which has given more work to other women in the community, which is great as well. We've also tried to expand our communication styles to make sure that we're accessible to people, that we're not like, okay, this is the way we work, you better jump on board or we're not there with you. So meeting them where they're at, giving phone calls, text messages, emails, however, carrier pigeons, however people need to be contacted to feel comfortable to participate. You know, checking in, hey, you know, we haven't received your feedback form, what's going on? Oh, well, I'm glad you called because I didn't feel comfortable to write it in my feedback form, but I didn't feel good about this interaction I had with so-and-so. These types of check-ins where it's really a personal experience. I think one of the biggest things we've been doing is just relationship building in this program, whether it's with us as the leadership team or with, you know, building the relationships with each other, but also with the communities that we're trying to recruit. So the next big thing that we've been pushing this year is recruitment in our effort to be more diverse, more inclusive, building long-term relationships. What we've noticed is when we reach out to places that are new places for us, or they're new to hearing from us, it's kind of like, okay, who are you? What do you want from me? And so in order to try to build these relationships, we're trying to say, we want you to feel comfortable in our space because we're trying to help you, and we want to give you what you need. So we can't know what you need unless we start to build these relationships and make this a community that we're both contributing to. So kind of just reaching out to you know, rural area schools, community centers, community organizers, other organizations that are dealing with gender equity, HBCUs, indigenous population communities, and really just trying to follow up regularly because we are not seeing these people apply in as big of numbers as we would like, and we really want to service the whole community, not just a part of the community. So the next thing that we've done is expand, as you can see, expand the workshops that we've offered. That was feedback from the mentees themselves. They said, okay, it's great to have a mentor, but I want to talk to my other peers. And it's been great to see them build those relationships where they have Instagram chats with each other. They start to get together to play outside of the program, follow each other's gigs, all of that sort of peer support that's important, especially at that age. And then we have also seen an expansion to include more women in the industry, music business people who are, you know, women in their fields, vice president of ASCAP, et cetera, type of, you know, a place where we can build a bridge to women in jazz business, women in jazz, et cetera, that are not just within the confines of what the traditional WEJO membership has been. I think, you know, the last thing that we're trying to do is just open it up to, just because we have now limited the number of selected applicants, we know that that comes with some consequences of being more exclusive. So we've been trying to offer events outside of the official program to people who, you know, maybe they didn't hear about the program in time to apply, or maybe they applied and didn't quite get in this year. You know, professional development, listening sessions, game nights, bringing people into the fold in ways that are not traditional, but it's sort of like, how do we build this gap? We still want to provide the community with these resources. So trying to find more and more spaces to open up to different parts of the community. So that's kind of like our initiatives within WEJO Mentors, within WEJO this year that we've been really focusing on, led by Tahira Clayton. And we're seeing great outcomes. We're seeing sort of what it means to implement DEIA, right, in an organization from the top down. We're starting with the leadership team change. We're starting with how do we deal with recruitment? How do we deal with this in a programmatic way? It's in the institutional things. It's in the communication style. It's in every part of the program and the organization. So we're seeing retention is the outcome. We're seeing people come back and want to be part of this space again. Can I apply again? Both mentors and mentees, which is great. That's telling us they feel comfortable, they feel like this space is for them. They're telling their friends. We're starting to see pockets where, oh, this university of so-and-so, they're all applying from there now because one person had a good experience. Or, oh, this one town in this state, oh, now they're applying because they want to be part of it. So that's telling us we're doing something right, but we know there's lots of room to improve still, so we're still working on it. And I just wanted to kind of give, you can go to the next slide. Maybe go to 4. So on the left, these are all mixed up, but that's our leadership team on the right. And on the left is a list of mentees and mentors from a couple of our seasons, this year and last year, because I just wanted to highlight those names, but they're so small because we see 2 slides. But I'm sure you would recognize some of the names, and this will be available later. You can just keep going forward. It's quite all right. There, that works too. Yeah, wonderful. And we can go to the next slide because there's images, and maybe you'll recognize their faces easier in this context. Next. So there should be 7, 8, 9 are the images, and those are sort of the most important ones, so hopefully you can find them. If not, we can go to the website. Yeah. So that's that.
So that's you. That's your mic. Thank you so much. I'm sorry about that. Really brilliant and exciting stuff, and I'm so excited to ask you some questions once we are all through with our presentations and everyone sharing. Next, I am so thrilled and honored to introduce Shanta Nurullah. Shanta Nurullah makes music primarily on sitar, bass, and mbira, and works as a storyteller and teaching artist. I think maybe I'll pause until the correct thing is on the screen. Okay. All right. So if we could go forward about... 3, 4. 4 slides, please. Just to slide number 4. You're in the presentation right now. Alrighty, I'm going to continue to introduce you. Shanta Nurullah makes music primarily on sitar, bass, and mbira, and works as a storyteller and teaching artist. She has been performing professionally as a musician since 1972 and as a storyteller since 1978. She co-founded 2 all-women's groups, Sojourner and Samana, and currently leads the ensemble Sitar Sis. With vocalist Zahara Baker, Shanta collaborates in the duo Shaza. A member of AACM, the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, Shanta has received a 3 Arts Award, an Artist Fellowship from the Illinois Arts Council, the Zora Neale Hurston Award from the National Association of Black Storytellers, and a Lifetime Achievement Award from M3, Mutual Mentorship for Musicians. She has performed in venues across the country, distinguished herself as a sitarist and bassist, exploring African American improvisational music. Shanta teaches at Chicago's Old Town School of Folk Music and is an advocate for women in music. I'm so thrilled to have you here with us.
Thank you. And Roxy, thank you for what you're doing. Wow.
So exciting, seriously.
Really. I wanted to just make a few general observations about the current state as I see it. I think since I've been in the music world over the last several years, I think things have definitely gotten better for women, especially on the stages. You see a lot more women on the stages, but you can still go to any number of events and not see any women on the stages. And I think more changes have taken place among the producers and curators than they have among the male musicians. I think at best, especially among the older musicians, they're practicing, even some of the younger male musicians, they're practicing more tokenism than they are any attempts at equity. If they have a big enough budget, they might hire a woman or maybe even two to play with them. But if they can only have a group of four playing, they're going to hire those four cats they're used to playing with, and that'll be it. What the group that Roxy talked about, what makes it so exciting is that what I've been hoping for years is, especially since music programs in schools have been so greatly reduced, elementary schools and high schools, sometimes reduced to only a teaching artist coming in for 4 weeks or 8 weeks. What I've seen has really been needed is a school to festival pipeline. You talk about the school to prison pipeline. Well, how about a school to festival pipeline for youngsters who are interested in music? And I think that what's required for equity is intentionality until equity becomes the norm. Having said all that, what I've been doing for the last year is mainly telling my story. So I'm gonna, as fast as I can, and no, I can't do that, because then we'll be here all night. So as fast as I can, with the help of the slides, if that all works out, I'd like to tell you my story. Okay. After spending almost 5 months studying sitar in India and getting a few bass lessons from Pete Cozy and then studying with Phil Coran in Chicago and having my own group, I wanted a role model. I wanted to see some women instrumentalists, and all I was seeing was vocalists. So in the mid-'70s, I went on a search, and you can start the slide number 1. I went on a search for women musicians, and my first stop was New York. And my idea was to interview women and maybe even write a book. The book never got written, but I did write a number of articles and have them published. I was able to meet Mary Lou Williams. I sat in her living room, and she told me stories about the people who were in that same living room, people like Thelonious Monk and a lot of other folks. Slide. I met Carlene Ray, who was in the International Sweethearts of Rhythm during the 40s and 50s and went on to play with Duke Ellington and did music with Alvin Ailey. And she's the mother of Catherine Russell. Even in her 70s, she decided to expand from playing the bass, electric bass, to playing upright bass, and she carried that upright on the subways of New York. I mean, a woman in her 70s carrying her upright on the subway, that really impressed me and inspired me. I met Sharon Freeman and Janice Robinson and Valerie Capers, Slide, Edna Smith, Edette, who was also in the International Sweethearts of Rhythm, Amina Claudine Myers, who I had met in Chicago, but she came to New York when a lot of the guys in the AACM moved to New York. I went to DC and sat with Elizabeth Cotton, who in her 90s won her first Grammy. I went to Indiana and met Dr. Portia Maltsby, who educated at least 5 or 6 generations of young musicians. I went to California and met Patrice Rushen and interviewed Vi Red, saxophonist Vi Red, and wrote articles about her. And then I met the wonderful Alice Coltrane and sat with her and had several years of correspondence with her. And she even wrote me a letter congratulating me on my 3rd child. So I was doing all of this while having babies. And then my very unhealthy marriage came to an end. And and I met Rita Warford, who was in the AACM. I met her on the street, and she said, "Shanta, we should put together an all-women's band," and so we did. We came up with 4 women from Chicago and 4 from Detroit, and we would schedule a gig. Sometimes we would rent a high school auditorium, and we would set a date, and we would do our own publicity, and we would come together 2 or 3 days before the gig, and we would rehearse, and then we would do a concert. And then whenever we got another gig, we would come together a couple of days before, and we would rehearse, and we would write music for Sojourner, and we would do a concert, and we did that for several years. And we performed at the Women's Jazz Festival in Kansas City before it moved to the East Coast. And that went on until I had 4 babies. And we also performed at the Women's Music Festival in Michigan. There's Sojourner. It was a great band. We opened for Betty Carter at a festival in Minneapolis, and we got some press. And then I had to go to work, and nobody else gotten any gigs, and so the band fell apart. And it seemed like every time I had a band and the band stopped working, I said, I'm never going to have a band again. But then my daughter ran into Maia, who now lives in California, and she said, you really need to call my mom. And she called me, and she said, I met this flute player on the street, Nicole Mitchell. And Nicole came over, and we jammed together, and we formed another group of women, Samana. And Samana, we practiced at 6 o'clock every Saturday and at 6 or 7 o'clock every Thursday for 8 years. And we made one recording. Slide, please. You can see Nicole right in the middle of that slide there. And we became the first all-women's group in the AACM, the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians. And there we are with some other women. You might see Tamika Reed and Renee Baker. That's at the AACM 50th slide. There we are, yeah. That's Maia standing up and Nicole next to her. That's the AACM 50th. Folks came in from France and Israel and Sweden, and it was wonderful. But you can see there's just a little pocket of women in the AACM. Well, now, Nicole was the first chairperson of the female chairperson of ACM, and now Coco Ulysses is another female chair of the ACM, and the ACM is kind of turning around, but I had to confront them about how most of my peers in that organization never really called me for any gigs. And it wasn't until the younger people like Juniors, Paul and Ben Lamar Gay came along that the men in the organization started calling me for gigs, and that's been my story. I always had to form my own bands, produce my own concerts in order to have work. Slide. The dean of the ASCM school was Ann Ward, and she left us a few years ago, and this was her homegoing, saying goodbye to Ann Ward. She was a phenomenal pianist and singer. Slide. The next group that I said I wasn't going to have another band, but I did it again. And this was a collaboration called Classic Black. Slide. We opened for Pharaoh at a festival in Chicago. Slide. This is my album. I years ago started my own label because nobody discovered me, and I said, well, since nobody's discovered me, I'll discover myself. And I put out about 4 recordings. This one I have with me in my bag if you're interested. Slide. My current group is Satarsis. Here we are at Tamika Reed's Chicago Jazz String Summit. And Slide. These are some of the Chicago women, along with Amina, who will always be a Chicago woman, even though she lives in New York. Here we are backstage at Nicole Mitchell's Women's Festival that she held in Chicago a few years ago. We've been doing it in Chicago. Women have been doing it in Chicago for a long time, and I just wanted you to know that. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And next, I have the immense pleasure of introducing Paola Prestini. Paola Prestini has collaborated with poets, filmmakers, and scientists in large-scale multimedia works that chart her interests in extra-musical themes ranging from the cosmos to the environment. She has created, written, and produced large-scale projects such as the world's largest and first communal VR opera, The Hubble Cantata, and the Echo documentary currently on PBS, The Colorado. Her current work, Sensorium X, dives deeply into community impact, opera, and AI, bridging her love of collaboration with system building. Her work has been performed by the New York Philharmonic, Minnesota Opera, Los Angeles Opera, San Diego Opera, the Barbican Center, Bellas Artes, and the Festival del Due Mondi in Spoleto, Italy. She has been a resident at Mass MoCA, the Park Avenue Armory, the American Academy in Rome, and at Sundance. Prestini is a co-founder of Vision into Art, a nonprofit new music and interdisciplinary arts production company in New York City, and is the co-founder and artistic director of the nonprofit music organization National Sawdust. Thank you so much, Paola, for joining us.
Thanks, Niama.
And I'm so thrilled to hear what you have to say this evening.
Thank you. Well, hearing you read my bio, it's like, I kind of, all that stuff happens so much later in life. And so I'm going to take also you through a journey up until now and just kind of paint the way that I got to where I am now, thinking about equity really at the forefront of the work that I do, both as a composer and also as a leader. And a collaborator at National Sawdust. So I guess we could move to the next slide. Before National Sawdust, I was actually, I start really at Juilliard because that was really where the source of so much trauma began for me. And it's really funny because it's not funny, but it's actually really poignant that right now we're together because it's the first time in 25 years that I gathered with women that I hadn't seen from Juilliard today to process that trauma. And, it ranged from everything from sexual violence to predation to intimidation to imposter syndrome to all the things that I think so many women on the stage and off and anyone really, of marginalized genders has gone through. And what's so interesting to me is that you end up trying to forget all of that before you can process it. And right now I'm starting to understand the puzzle of my life and why I took certain decisions. So before I started National Sawdust, I started Vision into Art, which I actually began at Juilliard. And it was a combination of really not understanding why all these disciplines were separate. At the time, Juilliard didn't have a jazz department. But it did have a dance department, a theater department, and not only were they not encouraged to collaborate, there was just no intersection. I think we were about 4 women in the entire time I was there, and we were definitely kind of for reasons we never communicated, so we were definitely not allies. Anyway, Vision into Art really became till today my first and only commissions until of the age of 40. So, that's really interesting to know that you can have a career and not be commissioned until you're 40. And by commissioned, I mean commissioned by the New York Philharmonic, which I think then you also have to ask about pay equity, right? Because when I was commissioned by the Philharmonic, I was paid $4,000. So it's not like I was getting a commission equal to men. I was getting a commission equal to what they thought my experience was, because I had never written for orchestra, but I could never write for orchestra because I wasn't, of course, in that kind of pipeline. So anyway, fast forward. I was always kind of commissioning myself and working on different projects that I was really passionate about. But it wasn't until I co-founded National Sawdust with this incredible gentleman and an incredible group of people that I really began to think, how could I actually impact my community? Because my own work does deal with that, but then there's people who are going through so much of the same trauma that I went through, and also just the trauma of trying to be an artist, which nobody needs you, So what does it mean to try to affect your surroundings that way? And so through that, we built National Sawdust. And, he was looking for a partner that, was in the music community and can kind of, help bridge different programs that would essentially bring about this idea of aesthetic equity. So I'm on this stage with these incredible people in the world of jazz. I'm not in the world of jazz, but I care very much about this intersection of where all these styles meet and what are some of the ways in which we can, create programs that benefit all. So anyway, National Sawdust, I think we can move to the next slide. Oh, okay, so National Sawdust, I'll get back to that, was built in 2015, and it's a beautiful space that really meditates on the idea of acoustics. And so it's really about how do you give musicians this kind of calling card, because I remember for me, it was I never had good recordings because I was performing in basement churches. But anyway, the one award that I've won to date was this award. I'm an immigrant. I immigrated to this country, to the border of Mexico when I was a kid. And it was the one award that really set me up, which was the Soros Fellowship. And I remember when, we can go back to the pie. When I got into that room, I was so shocked that I won, because there were no artists. And I remember Paul Soros asked. He said, "If you have a piece of pie, what do you do?" And we all said, "Well, of course you share it. You divide it." And he said, "No, you make more." And all of a sudden, I started thinking, instead of sitting here and trying to, think about what I don't have, well, what about what I can, what can I do to affect my surroundings? And that was transformational, because then all of a sudden I wasn't looking, I had never had a women mentor, let alone even known women composers, let alone ones who wanted to have families, or so on and so forth. So anyway, piece of pie, that was really changed my life. We can go to the next slide. So for National Sawdust, I wanted a place where people could dream. I show this slide because it's ice skating. And the idea is all the no's that I got, I wanted people to be able to come and be I want to do ice skating and I want to sing. And be let's try to find, a way to make that happen. The pandemic hit us very hard, so we're not doing ice skating anymore. But I love that example. Let's go to the next slide. We've had many different artists in residence, and this was a piece that I really loved. And part of the residency program gives funds and really gives mentorship, but also just gives space, because I think often artists just need space to create. And this is Helga Davis creating this incredible piece called Requiem for a Tuesday with Reggie Red Rock Gray. And it was one of the most phenomenal works that really involved the community into questions, which you can see everybody wrote on the center stage. And because it's a non-union hall, you can kind of use it in any way you'd like. Slide. That's another image. Slide. Alicia Hall Moran was actually our first artist in residence, and she created a series of 5 works that then went on to other places. And that's kind of the idea, is that, you seed ideas at Sawdust. It's not a ton of money, but that these ideas can then go on to potentially go to spaces that do entirely commission it, or it becomes places, a place that people can create a dream, and it is made for the space, which I really love. Slide. We've had artists like Tanya Tagak, who's an incredible Inuit singer, and one of the things I love about Tanya is that she really talks about, again, what does it mean to be a composer? And I think so often, especially in the Western canon, people think that you have to write it down. Well, you don't. Like Tanya doesn't write music, but it doesn't mean that she's not a composer. And so this really brought up a lot of questions about intellectual property, indigenous intellectual property. What does it mean in America? In America, we do not, we all know this, but we do not respect, I don't know what the word is right now, but we do not compensate, or look at indigenous intellectual property. So a lot of the artists that come in also share with us and help us kind of expand for our ever-growing community of artists and audiences these kind of topics. Slide. We opened this season with Esperanza Spalding and Jojo Abbott in an incredible opera, incredible sound opera that they created, and we produced and commissioned. Slide. And this is our Idea Zone, which is really lovingly curated by our team. We have an incredible marketing director, Zan, who's here today, and also Lynn Prokop, who's a poet. And the idea that words really matter. How do we take some of these topics that are on our stage and then bring them to our website so that they can live on and people can kind of go through the spiral of understanding these different topics in different ways. So here you can see some of the different kind of topics that we cover and some of the different guests that we've had. Slide. Another example. Slide. This gets a little bit to my own work. So part of what I've been figuring out is like how to balance being a mother, a friend, leading the space, and being an artist. And to be honest, I wasn't doing a great job because nobody tells you, but it's actually not possible to do all these things well. You have to kind of accept that there's moments, and I think like if I had been kind to myself, I would have been like, I'm birthing something. It's not a composition, but it is a type of composition, and it's a space, and it's and it's like if I had been kind that way, I wouldn't try to like kill myself to do all those things well, and then like not been happy, So, bottom line now, we actually have an amazing management team, and I had to like accept that like while I'm a type of leader, like I'm not the kind of leader that can really do all those things well, and so it's been a wonderful like gift to have our new managing director, who's incredible, Ana Derchuleta, and then Kim Chan, who is an incredible director as well. But anyway, Con Alma is a work that I did during the pandemic, and I bring this up because it really hits to like the idea of impact frames, and I'm going to keep going. I know I'm taking up too much time, so I'm going to go a little bit quickly. But anyway, the idea of an impact frame in the work is like, how do you really kind of, use certain questions to instigate community participation and to really go deeply into creating a work of art that needs community participation. So my dear friend Magos Herrera, who's a jazz artist, and we were very close, and we were separate during the pandemic. I was on the border, she was in Mexico, and we began to kind of collaborate, via long distance, asking questions of what is the sound of isolation. And so we decided to create this like kind of evening-length work that included our community that was international, but that also raised the question of what is your sound of isolation to the public. And because she was kind of connected in Mexico City to their kind of PBS, and I was connected here in New York, we kind of opened that question up and began to get these incredible sounds of isolation that essentially served as like an artifact of our time, and began to stitch those through in performance. Bless you. So between that and then asking, we had like connections to several different choirs for kids to participate and adults to send in their own Cucurucucu Paloma. We put together this really fun thing, which is now being shown at the United Nations at the largest gender equity conference in March. So I invite you all March 14th. But I'm just going to, next slide. Just play a second of it because you can see some of the participation that happened. We can just scrub a little bit if you don't mind to like 15 seconds.
Dicen que por las noches no más se le ven puro llorar. Dicen que no comía, no más se le ven puro tomar.
2 seconds, you'll get the kids.
Juran que el como cielo se estremecían en su llanto, como sufrió por ella, que hasta en su muerte la
This was done live during the pandemic. You can keep playing. When we still weren't really syncing. So this is Magos in Mexico in a hotel room, and we're streaming international Sawdust. And then all these people who just sent us in their own versions. So anyway, you know what I loved about it was like in this moment of tremendous isolation, all of a sudden we had a unity that really was an experience of voice and of communion and of touch, even though we couldn't touch each other. And it was a beautiful experience. And now there is this kind of idea of what does a resilience strategy look like? When you have to use what you have in order to create sources of resilience, what does that mean? Slide. Yeah, so then real quickly, this just gets to how do we attack this idea of very specifically gender equity in the sense of aesthetic equity. Again, when I say composition, I mean composition of all styles at National Sawdust. And we have several different ways. We have Student Collab, which really focuses on our immediate community. I think, if you don't know, we're in Williamsburg, which is an incredibly, it was a Latino neighborhood, which has now completely been displaced. But it's not been displaced. They've just slowly been kind of, marginalized out of the neighborhood. But there's an incredible institution called El Puente, which is run by a wonderful woman, and we partner with them and with kids from El Puente and from different elementary schools to work with our artists in residence to create different works. We have a program with Juilliard, which I'm not going to run anymore. This actually gets to this idea of like my whole life I believed that you could Trojan horse things, and the truth is I don't believe you can do that anymore. So I think that's an age thing. I think when you're younger and you don't have the tools to really articulate strongly what it means to not have fear, you can think that you need to kind of convince people. But now I think you actually, if you can, emotionally do it, it's much better to be head on. So that was my attempt to like kind of fix my past without really addressing it. Then we have the Hildegard Commission, which is really focused on women and other marginalized genders. That comes with a commissioning fee of $5,000. About 5 different people win, and they get mentorship with different artists and kind of professional service organizations, and then a performance by our own ensemble and a recording. And then we have a really deep program with the Center for Ballet Arts in NYU, which has 3 different residencies per year. They're in kind of collaborative relationships with choreographers, and they get $15,000 each. Those are all actually funded at the moment by one person, which is Alex Sanger of the Toulmin Foundation. He's been incredible, and he's the great-grandson of Margaret Sanger of Planned Parenthood. But it's our hope and intention to kind of, find more support for that, understand the intersectionality of these causes, and really examine how they're working and try to be evergreen. Because I think the truth is that as we go deeper and deeper into what equity means, we have to ask ourselves, do our programs serve? Am I the right person to lead? Like, to be really humble and understand just that we need to kind of get to the bottom of all this. So just to end, I think we can get to the next slide. Oh, these are just some pictures. We can keep going. And we don't have to play this for now.
You can achieve anything if you put your mind.
That's one of our young collab students. These are some of the Hildegard Commission winners. These are some of our Toulmin creators. Then we can keep going, I think just to the last slide. Oh, that's okay. So anyway, just to, to say, I guess the full picture is that I take away from this is, sometimes it takes a long time to process what it means to be a woman in these fields. And I think that, I guess I'm just really grateful to have been able to have an institution that is actually, deeply supported by a small board, and that's run by a woman board president who I really admire. and that the idea of Trojan horsing at this point in my life is no longer relevant. So I'm excited to see what this next phase means in terms of really understanding how to achieve equity. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Paola. And we now have the brilliant Michele Rosewoman sharing with us. Do you want me to read your full bio? I don't want to.
Do what you want, like you do.
All right. And it begins with a quote. No other pianist composer in jazz brings the music of African diaspora together quite like Michele Rosewoman. One of the most compelling inside-out pianists in jazz, Rosewoman combines a myriad of influences, including Herbie Hancock, Cecil Taylor, and Thelonious Monk. In her playing and writing, Rosewoman is way past collecting influences. Simply put, she is one of the most creative and fully realized jazz artists on the scene today.
You don't have to read that full bio if you want to do it. Do it feels right on that.
I'm going to try. Okay. Born in Oakland, California, Michele Rosewoman began playing piano at age 6 and was deeply influenced by the great pianist and organist Ed Kelly, which you'll talk to us about. This is why I didn't want to read this, because I was like, I'm stealing all the thunder with this bio. Okay. Miss Rosewoman has presented her various ensembles at jazz festivals, concert halls, clubs, and universities throughout the world. She served as a board member at Chamber Music America from 2016 to 2022 and remains an active and dedicated educator, conducting intensive workshops and residencies in a variety of settings. She teaches piano and composition privately, has held past positions at NYU and the New School, and currently serves on the faculty at the New School and the Jazz House Kids program in Montclair, New Jersey, teaching theory, piano, composition, and ensemble. I am so thrilled for this presentation. Take it away, Michele.
After everything I've heard, I hardly know where to start. Let me start by saying that I plan to share my experience as a woman moving through the world of music. Kind of a lone wolf has been my journey and my feeling, you know, and everything everybody said resonated in various ways. I related a lot to Shanta's journey, except that I was really never part of an organization. I was just kind of doing my thing. I feel that the positive impact that I've made on gender equity has been and is really through pursuing my dreams, staying aligned with my passion and clear sense of purpose, and sharing my knowledge, while feeling spiritually guided every step of the way and knowing that I'm living the life meant for me to live. For me, this is foundational, and from there I feel like maybe I have something to offer. I have a lot of stories to tell. I have a lot of history. Got a couple of years on me at this point, but I did create kind of a slideshow to go along with telling my own history, like Shanta told her story. And I'm going to start from coming up, my family. And the first thing that I'm going to share is my mother's artwork. Well, as mentioned, I was born in Oakland in the 50s, and I was raised in a home full of music, art, and politics. Really influenced by atypical mother and father, very traditional in some ways and non-traditional in others. Mother older than father, that was rare back then. And very influenced by her artistic vision. I feel like I hear the way that she saw. So I'm showing you a few of her paintings, all of which really have touched me deeply. I look back now at the ways that we've shared Mama being gone, and feel like as a woman to have such a model as a mother is to set me off on the right track. And also just at home being raised in an activist kind of environment, and which really tied me to philosophically, beyond being turned on by jazz and all that it represented, I was really philosophically drawn to it as well. So in those years in Oakland at that time, police brutality was some of the worst in the country, and the environment was very politically charged. So ultimately, I felt that all of this accentuated and influenced my affinity for jazz to the phenomena of it. And music can be a savior when going through hard times. It uplifts and transforms. And speaking personally, a lot of my own creativity has come from my own emotional journey. There's something about the nature of jazz, an improvised music and expression born of the Afro-American experience that reflects the thrust for freedom, whether as an individual, a people, or a gender. So I've always related to the music as a whole and felt that I was aligned and that in the company of many who were struggling to do what they somehow had to do because the music was not supported. And it's a different time now. Things are just so different, which is a beautiful thing in so many ways. Let's see, moving on. In my late teens, I was going to say on a broad scale, it's understandable and clear that historical and economic climates give birth to music and art of a particular kind. And jazz is absolutely a reflection of the times and the social realities. So I think that this is all relevant to what we're doing and talking about and representing up here. In my late teens, I was kind of going about finding my own voice and life leading me where I needed to be. I met my two really major mentors. I have to say that my mentors were all men. At a certain stage, I reached out to a couple of women that I felt inspired by. I won't name names because they never wrote back. And I just figured, it kind of hurt me at the time because I was so excited, you know. But I really came to understand what it takes. You just have to focus and keep moving, and you're not necessarily, they weren't necessarily trying to represent women. They were just trying to do what they had to do, felt compelled to do, and were born to do. And I can relate to that. So Ed Kelly, I was at a community college, really just hanging out. I never did go to school for music. I took a couple of semesters of harmony and got in the big band because I could play a blues in F. And I couldn't even read chord symbols at the time, but I knew what was going on here. So that was really where my path was born. I soon after met the great Marcus Gordon, who was a percussionist that's with whom I delved into, this is a reunion some years ago, I delved into really spiritual, deep Afro-Cuban traditions, and at the time didn't realize it, but that's really when my path was born. It was the comings together of, I started playing piano at 6, but I was about 18 when I started to really play congas and percussion. So I've been very blessed in that I think I have a good instinct about support of individuals. I did not have a structure of support, but I had good instincts. And so I just felt like I was in a supportive world that led me to each next step. And I think mentors are so vital, and I'm proud that I've been that now to some folks, some women, girls, and beyond. And even though I didn't have any women mentors. But these days I do, you know. I mean, I'm mentored by young women, older women. I feel blessed for what's going on today. I'm jumping around because things that were spoke on keep coming to my mind. The fact that things are so different now. I've been offered lots of opportunity through women coming together to make sure that women receive more opportunity. The last 3-4 years have been full of that. A lot thanks to Terry Carrington and thanks to the M3 organization. I think, you know, like what Shanta said too, necessity and frustration with circumstance often leads us to finding our own solutions. And I was ready to go and the phone wasn't ringing, you know, wasn't looking for me. So I started my own groups, started writing, and built my own momentum. So let's see. I want to mention that in those days, I became very aware of women's place in society, and I was pissed off. I was, it really hit me. I was struck by worldwide women in society and our roles, our treatment. I was mad at my brother, my father. I was mad at everybody for good reason. That was good for me. But I was raised in such a way as to identify basically with all oppressed people, and I decided at a young age that I was not going to view the world through just the lens of an oppressed woman. It was a real conscious decision on my part, and I think that it meant for me that a lot of times I didn't even realize what was going on. I'm like, damn, what was that? I don't know, and just keep stepping, Later I look back and I said, oh, that was probably because I'm a woman. But, to get hung up on that at the time did me no good. I find myself encouraging young women not to get hung up that way, too. We do need to focus on what's going on around us. We need to be aware of it, and we need to confront it, but we also need to stay on course. So, where are we at? Oh, so I moved to Seattle, Washington for a while. I got involved with a circle of Shona women, and I studied mbira, and interested in find out that Shanta played mbira. So during that time, there was a beautiful day, where it was just nothing but women and children. Must have been about 20 of us. And I wrote this poem later about it. I had recorded it, and I could hear the children laughing and crying, and the beautiful Shona chants, and the women, the master women, the masters of the mbira that I was learning and playing. So I'm going to read this poem. The women and the children. The women and children found strength in isolation. We got this network of song, dance, and unspoken motion. Water-like, traditional fluidity, the fire in our inner eye that sees and reflects the Mother Earthness of this moment. The women and children gather, gather. A web of being at the base of it, winding around, encircling the laughter and the children's tears with song. The women and children gather to soften the edges of brutal foundations, slow but effective eating out infiltrator, running into all cracks. Fluidity is her way. Moon song to sanctify. Hey, we gather round to find the open sesame of the heart, your waxing, waning heart. I didn't have children. I worked with children my whole life, and I'm also really impressed, moved, and touched by women in this field that have children and gave birth and raised children alongside of building their own career, because I feel like it's taken everything I have to get where I've gotten, learn what I wanted to learn, and to continue to do so. And so big respect, big respect. Let's see, I moved to New York in 1978. I was encouraged by New York-based musicians. The Keystone Corner was my hang in San Francisco. And I met folks like Cecil Taylor. His saxophonist Jimmy Lyons really encouraged me to come. Again, finding, meeting, being guided towards very supportive figures in a world where there were very few women. I guess I had my moments where I looked for that, but basically I just tried to do what I was trying to do and kept stepping. And I challenged myself to take everything I had learned thus far and come to New York. So again, I've been here since 1978. And my first trip to Europe, I actually had experience in Seattle as well when I was on the road, where I was waylaid and told that the only room I could stay in was the room with the band leader. And so we all have stories like this. And really, I remember I can go back to the feeling of a hurt and what I felt at the time, but there was no time to feel that. It was about keep stepping. So this has been my way. And I look back really just the other day, it kind of hit me in my heart that a couple of those situations were really messed up, really messed up. But let's see, where are we at? So I came to New York in 1983. I formed a group called New Yoruba. The name represents New York, Cuba, Yoruba, from the progression of the Yoruba people by way of Cuba to present-day New York. This was where my worlds musically came together, where I heard everything as one. There were very few women on the scene. Again, this is our first trip to Europe, and you can see we were all so young. 2 of those 4 are gone. You will not see a lot of women in my slides and images because that's just the way it was. But I took a position of leadership and had to earn it. I was younger than most everyone else in the band. I remember in Europe they kind of dogged me and said that I just put together a bunch of people with names and got over, but everybody in the band were my associates. And so that's probably evidence of a bias there for me as a woman leading a band younger than everybody else. So there were challenges all along the way. Anyway, in the world of folklore, in the world of Cuban folklore, which is built very much around the bata drums that women did not play. In Puntilla's world, women didn't play. And I accepted that because I was invited in to learn everything that I needed to learn, and I didn't need to challenge that at the time. Much later, his godchildren became my teachers, hands-on on the drums. So times change, opportunity changes, but you stick with your course regardless. And I was able to put this music and this ensemble together based on the things I was able to learn, the way I went about learning them. The light's kind of messed up here, excuse me. So this is the debut of the concert, and with me on stage is the great Olufemi Mitchell, who became my madrina, my godmother. I didn't know she would be at the time. Any number of these people passed away, including the trumpet player with the hat on the right, who just passed yesterday. So there's just too many as I look back. I was very supported and honored by the musicians around me, pretty much so. I have to say that I learned to create an environment in which I could strive. And I really didn't want to bring problems into my circle, because I did go through some, and I didn't feel like repeating those mistakes. Certain individuals used to feel indispensable, and I would put myself through it again. But basically, I learned to have a good antenna about what was going to work, what would not detract from my efforts, and what would add to it. By the way, before I came to New York, I lived next door to one of the great founders of the Black Artist Group from St. Louis, by Kitty Carroll. And through him, I met all the AACM and BAG people that stayed with Baikita. And I mention that because Shanta knows all those folks that came and that I met there. And they were all men. Although one of my first trips to New York, I went to Ali's Alley to hang. And I'll never forget, I sat in, and as I walked out, this beautiful, warm lady met me at the door and said, "Hi, I'm Amina Claudine Miners. Welcome." I told her I had just, come visiting from New York. And so other than, this is my experience, occasional women that, up to that time, that crossed my path, that blessed me with their presence. And otherwise, it was just me doing what I do. Okay, this is New Yoruba later, much later. This is, by the way, New Yoruba was debuted in 1983, and we did not record ever anything until 2013. So that was our 30-year anniversary debut recording, and this was a concert right before we went into the studio. That's the great Roman Diaz in the middle, who became a mentor of mine as well, and is my close associate in the music. So again, blessed with great mentorship, again, men, but that's been my reality. So you can move on with the slides. So as I mentioned, this is at Dizzy's. a slide. This is at the Painted Bride in Philadelphia, and with me is Alma McKen, who's a great folkloric singer. She's Afro-American, but is incredibly knowledgeable in the Orisha music, which New Yoruba proudly represents. There's something that I really do want to read to you from an interview that has to do with that folkloric culture. This is from an interview that I came across that I did that just said some things that I didn't need to reconstruct them. Let me find it a second. Give me a second. So, you know, women have a more defined place in Afro-Cuban culture. There's a kind of quick camaraderie that happens there. I was generally there as a pianist, but also as a singer in the chorus, which brought me together with the other women that were in the chorus and the dancers that there were often women. So in the dressing room, there was a lot of camaraderie, everybody wrapping each other's heads with scarves and getting dressed, and the sharing of getting ready to present this beautiful folkloric spiritual music. Those were times that I was surrounded by women, and they were greatly treasured. One of the things that was very apparent to me, the religion, I'm referring to the Oja religion, born of Yoruba, and the religion is very defining in terms of the roles of men and women. But within that, there are a lot of treasured gay men and women who are treasured by the community. It's not a strictly male kind of a thing, and ultimately, this is what I think about amongst the Orishas and the deities. It's a female goddess that gave birth to most of the other deities. And they credit her as being the source from which all of these heavy, powerful male deities come. As a practitioner myself, when you see the power of the ocean, and her name is Yamaya, and you know that she is a vital female force within this religious structure, it does offer a heightened sense of your own potency. So you can kind of look at a lot of things, a lot of ways. We can move on. Okay, so this is me in Cuba in 1996, where I was invited to sit on the bata. And up till then, it really wasn't happening here. I think the further one is from the source, the more strict people try to be about what's right and what's wrong, and that gets used against women a lot of times. So in Cuba, I was invited to play. And from that time on, I've gone on to learn a lot hands-on, which has given me what I need to know, you know, to be able to do what it is I need to do. For me, that was that's a feat to get to that point after so many years of accepting a certain reality and then ending up somewhere that, as a woman in an environment, that I'm given enough respect and courtesy because people know what I'm trying to do and my purpose to invite me. And I'm not the one to challenge these ancient laws and traditions, but I will find my way through it and get what I need to do, what it is I'm trying to do. So that's been my story, I guess. Okay, moving on. So this is the beginning of my quintessence ensemble, which was born in 1987. Terry Lynn Carrington was a member of that. And it's funny how a lot of years passed, and it's really in the last 5 years that we've reconnected so much. I look to rebirth quintessence this year and have Terry Lynn as a special guest. We haven't recorded since 2006. These are just images of, as I told you, me with cats, you know. Okay, this is New York Woman magazine that did a special feature on jazz musicians. They must have done hour-long interviews with each of us that ended up being one short quote each. At the bottom of this page was like a strip with all of our quotes. But you see here, Amina Claudia Myers, Terry Kenton, Sharon Freeman, who I hope somebody can tell me where she is and what she's doing, and myself and Jerry Allen and Jane Ira Bloom. can move on. This was a wonderful opportunity, invited to do piano jazz with the great Marion McPartland. That's an elegant, important woman in our world of music. And she didn't miss anybody. If she invited me, she must have invited just about everybody. That's the way I look at it. Actually, early on in my career, I feel like I was given a lot of dap, a lot of opportunity beyond what I expected. When I got back from European tour in 1983 to a letter saying I had won the ASCAP Meet the Composer Award and they wanted me to write for the Brooklyn Philharmonic, I was absolutely sure it was a mistake. I said, oh, shoot, this is a mistake. They said this to the wrong person, and I'm not lying. I really thought that. And the Brooklyn Philharmonic, as I said, I did not go to college, but I wrote for the Brooklyn Philharmonic and performed with a quintet of improvisers, all men and myself, but there were women in the orchestra. And that was a beautiful experience that expanded my knowledge and my experiences. And this was a picture, I believe it was at Charlie Hayden's memorial service that I saw Jerry, and we had a beautiful moment. I miss Jerry, we all miss Jerry. Whew. Wow, that's a shooting star. So they came and left way too soon and gave so much. And this was at the Kennedy Center where I think on this trip I was there with my New Yoruba ensemble. They actually brought my 11-piece ensemble for the Mary Lou Williams Festival. And it was a beautiful hang with Bertha Hope and Dee Dee Bridgewater and a whole lot of other folks. Okay, as an educator, I've done a lot since very young. I started teaching at the Haight-Ashbury Music Workshop in San Francisco, and I brought women musicians together at that time that formed ensembles. In fact, there's a group called Alive that some people may have heard of that met in my workshop. And this was, well, the last photo was New York Kids on Stage, a youth choir that I started. And it was a beautiful program I was a part of, and worked with a lot of young girls that really didn't believe they had skills to sing or act or anything else. So it was beautiful to watch their progression. This is with the Jazz House Kids, and I've been able to work with lots of young, aspiring jazz musicians. Many girls are a part of that program, and Melissa Walker does a lot to make sure that happens. This was behind the Sweet Basil dressing room when I was there with New Yoruba, and was just beyond honored that Cecil Taylor and James Spalding came out to hear the music. And this here is just last week at the City Winery, part of the New Standards, Terry Lynn's New Standards presentation. And it was a reunion for me with Tia Fuller. We had played together once. And I had met the drummer up at when I did a workshop at Terry Lynn's. I think I pretty much told this story. In the last few years, as I say, Terry Lynn brought me up there for workshops, included me in the archive of scores at Berkeley College and in the New Standards Songbook. And I was also, during the pandemic, commissioned by Mutual Mentorship for musicians to do a dual piece. Shanta and I were in the same cohort for that. And I did a piece with Malika Zara. This was a treasured collaboration with a woman. Thank you, Lord. And I have to say that I have a lot of work to do in terms of expanding my own environment to include more women. And what's beautiful is I'm hearing more and more young women that are such great players that that's no leap. It's not going to be a leap. It's just a matter of I'm used to the people that have been with me a long time, and to have a working band is a special thing, but there will be moments and openings where I can really do my part to bring more young women, great musicians, into my personal circle. But I think we're going to just show, let's just skip to the video and show a couple minutes of the collaboration that I did. This poem that's here is included, parts of it are text are in this presentation anyway. This was a 7-minute video, and I just selected a few minutes to show you this collaboration with Malika, who I finally met in person. This was virtual, but the virtual age brought opportunities of their own kind, and this was one for me. Something's holy, cover. Keep tactics under cover.
Va où le soleil se lève, fait briller un nouveau jour, là où je respire mon esprit est lié. Là où les pas se poseront, l'égalité brillera, fluide comme l'eau, la liberté coulera.
Oh yeah, escuchen las llamadas y sabes que no hay parada. To dance for pretense. Fair is fair, but they don't know how to breathe out there. But home is everywhere there's air. Backwards driving, somehow surviving, still aglow in the eye of this out of control. A stride, powered by make a way. This sunrise, shimmer with new day. It's called Arising, and if you look up my name and Arising on YouTube, you can watch the whole thing. I used my mother's art as a backdrop. One of the last things she said to me about her work was, it doesn't matter, nobody's going to see it anyway. So I've been on a mission to make sure it gets seen, and it's not a big jump for me because I truly feel her work. And so this was an opportunity to play percussion, play cowbells, play congas, play keyboard, sing, and work with this beautiful woman who, if you don't know, you should, Malika Zara. I'm grateful for all the opportunities offered me these last few years through women and organizations. What you guys are doing is things like that weren't going on back in the day, you know, and it's really something to see this effort and success at changing the picture. And I appreciate all of you for all that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michele. What a pleasure. So we don't have a ton of time. We're actually over time right now, but I do want to sort of open a question or comment to each of you for your reflection after having listened to each other. In particular, Shanta said something that really popped into my head and just was like a light bulb moment for me. Since no one discovered me, I discovered myself. So brilliant, so thought-provoking, but also really very much a moment where you clearly had taken inventory of what was happening around you. And I wonder about, you know, having listened to each of you share and you all having listened to each other, I wonder about how you consider self-determination in the processes of the work that you've been doing and just your life experience as far as artists.
I definitely, I saw the eyes. I definitely identified, I heard each of the three of you say that at some point, and I identified with that. I myself hit a point where I said, okay, I've been fired from this band disbanded, and I have no work. And I don't like the options that are out there. So, and I was going out to jam sessions every night, and it was just like, okay, what are we working towards here? So that's when I started my quintet, and eventually Weejo. I think that really resonated with me, that I heard all three of you say that. You have to create your own opportunity at some point.
Well, I said it already, right?
I was like, no pressure. You don't actually.
Okay, but I know a lot of women who I made music with years ago who are no longer making music. Okay? And so I think that perhaps my greatest achievement is that I have not given up. You know, I'm still doing it.
You know, this world needs our, there's imbalance out here, you know, without us making the music that we feel compelled to make, there would be a serious imbalance. So somehow the universe strives for balance all on its own, so it creates people like you, or you know, all of us, because we're all compelled to have something to do with outcome, and not just sit around and wait for something to happen.
I mean, I think it's been said beautifully. You know, I think that it's been said beautifully. You have to, you know, if you're lucky, you keep creating and you manifest, but I think also, you know, you in the capacity you can, you want to change the models, you know, because they're not good models. They need to be changed. There's gatekeeping issues. There's just also all the lost voices. You know, people who couldn't continue to write, and that's tragic. You know, so I think there's, you know, while I think it's so important not to get too bogged down, and I really hear you when you say, like, you had to keep working, because that's also a form of protest, right? To keep working. I think that, you know, in the ways we can, we have to manifest change. So it's a balance.
And I think that is the end of our show. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Shanta, to Paola, to Michele, to Roxy, and to Frida, our wonderful producer this evening, and of course to you for being here with us. Thank you so much. And Kiana as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone.